You know, I probably should have thought a little bit before using that image in my background because now I think we all have weeping angels. Hello interwebs, welcome to my latest review of Doctor Who Flux, Episode 4, Village of the Angels, and heavens, finally, we actually have a really good episode of this season. I have not loved this season overall, as many of you know, nor Chris Chibnall's run, but this episode was legitimately very good, and I enjoyed it, which is kind of funny considering that this is probably the episode that has the least to do with the actual ongoing plotline of the Flux this season. But before we get to my spoiler-filled review, and just a reminder, this is going to be a spoiler review, so if you have not seen the episode, just know that there are spoilers ahead. But before we get to that, just a quick reminder that the BBC, who produces Doctor Who, is also currently embroiled in a controversy surrounding an article that they posted that was spreading a lot of misinformation and harm against the transgender community, as well as, in its initial form, platformed a woman named Dilly Cade, who literally called for the genocide of trans people, and the BBC has neither taken down the article nor apologized for platforming this woman, and seems to be doubling down on even worse stuff around trans issues and transphobia. And if any of that information is new to you, I would highly recommend you check out two of the videos that I have posted down below. One that's a quick video from a friend of mine, Council Geeks, that's specifically about the situation that I was discussing, and then another one of those videos, which is mine, which is about the broader context around gender critical feminists, aka TERFs, in the UK as well as elsewhere, and the dangers that they can cause. So I just want to quick bring that up because it would be remiss of me to talk about a BBC product without mentioning it. But the not fun stuff aside, let's get into less scary stuff than transphobia, weeping angels. As I kind of alluded to earlier, I really enjoyed this episode, but it's also one that seems to have the least to do with the Flux overall. In fact, the Flux stuff in this episode felt so outside of what I was caring about or what I was interested in. And I'm starting to notice a pattern with this Flux series. What I was really hoping when I went into the season was that the Flux, being a season-long story arc, was really going to play to Chris Chibnall's strengths as a writer, given that I have found that his writing outside of Doctor Who is typically very strong when he's given like really long arcs and work with multiple different characters across multiple different specific storylines over the course of a season. But honestly, this season's two strongest episodes so far, this one and the Sontaran one 2 episodes ago, were very much individual episodic focused episodes, and this one even beats the Sontaran one by miles in my opinion, but they're both much stronger, and they were both the ones that had the least to do with the Flux and actually were focused on telling a singular storyline, and that very much happens here. Now, by no means did this episode, revolutionize the wheel. In fact, a lot of this episode is kind of what Chris Chibnall does best, quote-unquote best there, in that it's basically remixing a lot of different stuff that we've seen with Weeping Angels so far, but kind of by remixing it, doing it in a really fresh and interesting way. And I liked all the unique takes on some of the Weeping Angel lore that we got into this episode, and it made the Weeping Angels feel kind of scary again. Not to the level that they were in Blink. This did not have that level of mood, or neither even the Army of the Angels one from the 11th Doctor era, but it certainly had a lot more weight than the Weeping Angels had towards the end of the 11th Doctor's era, and I think they might have appeared once or twice in the 12th Doctor's run. I don't even remember, honestly. But it was nice to have them feel impactful here and really building out some of the rules and playing with some of the rules that we had seen them use before, and that was truly wonderful. So this episode didn't knock it out of the park, but it was definitely a very solid episode that brought back one of a fan favorite alien and one of my favorite creatures in all of Doctor Who, to be honest with you, but made them feel impactful again in a way that they haven't been in a while, and I deeply appreciated that. But let's get into some of the specifics here, and I think the storyline that worked the least for me was the stuff that had to, as I alluded earlier, had to do with the Flux, this time being with Belle's story, Belle being the girl who is the long-lost lover of Vinder looking for Vinder. I still am, somewhat lost on this concept that Belle and also Vinder are looking for each other when they don't really know that either of them are still alive in a galaxy that's literally been torn apart, and you're trying to find one person in an entire galaxy, not even knowing if he's alive, and I guess you have nothing else better to do, but it's just I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. What evidence does she have that he's still alive other than, faith? Which I could maybe buy if it was, they were looking for the Doctor, but them looking for just each other, their random lover in this sea of people, presumably, just feels weird and not really believable to me. At least in the way that it's supposed to be portrayed earnestly. I could see it being I guess I have nothing else better to do, but she earnestly believes he's still alive, and we only know that that's true because we've seen Vinder in other parts of this season. And so I just don't buy it. But regardless, turns out she shows up on a planet where other people are congregating looking for Vinder, and Azure is there, and she's getting everyone in a Mad Maxian way sort of to stick them into passenger and do whatever with them by lying to them and saying that she's going to take them somewhere safe. Presumably she's going to hold them hostage or something like that. I'm sure we'll find out down the line what's going on with them. This kind of felt like a little bit of a remix of The Master way back in Series 3 with the 10th Doctor at the end of the universe storyline, where he sort of like made that fake signal for people to go to and then ultimately use them for his nefarious plots, those little orb ball people in the finale of Series 3. And kind of just felt like a remix of that. Again, what Chris Chibnall does best, remixing old stuff. But here it was just kind of played straight, and again, this felt so ancillary to the rest of the episode that I'm like, why are we even bothering with the Flux at this point? Like, it just feels so not relevant to anything that I care about when I'm watching these episodes, at least the episodes that I've enjoyed so far, that it's just sort of like, okay, I guess that's a thing that happens. And then there's a mid-credit sequence where Vinder runs into the message from Bell, so at least we get an acknowledgement that now they both are aware that they're alive, and Bell is now going after Azure, which I find hysterical because it feels like Bell is being more the protagonist of this Flux plot than the Doctor is, and it just feels like, all right, well, sure. Let's have her deal with it instead of the Doctor, because the Doctor's got other stuff going on that I care about more. So ultimately, that whole storyline just felt frustrating, and it's not bad necessarily, but it's just not intriguing. And I just sort of like, sure, cool, fine. But that's enough of the negative. Let's talk about something actually positive with Doctor Who the rest of this episode, because we have the Angel has the phone box, which I thought was an absolutely cool idea, finally paying off those like famous t-shirts and slogans from way back in Series 3 as well of Doctor Who. So that was just really cool as well. We also get to see Claire from the season premiere of this episode. She is back in the 1960s, and she's being tested by this Dr. Jericho guy who's like getting her brain scan. I loved this concept that he's like doing a lie detector test on her to get baselines, and she's lying about the date, which is causing the time thing to go off. It does not make sense if it's like a lie detector that she would be lying about the date, because she would know what the date was and that wouldn't be a lie, but I get what they were going for. It works better with her birth date though, because when she says her birth date, she would actually be lying about that. So that makes a little bit more sense. But I like this in concept. If you think about it a little bit too hard, there's a little bit of a wonkiness to it, but I liked it quite a bit. But then we get a cool sequence with the Doctor ejecting the Angel from the phone box. I like it slowly coming at them in the TARDIS. I thought that was really wonderful. And then the clever solution is that they had to blink to put it into quantum flux so that she could eject it. And I like that nice little subversion there. That was kind of clever. But the gang arrives in the 1940s. I said 60s earlier, I meant 40s. And they run into some people who are looking for a little girl named Peggy. And so they kind of go their separate ways, with the Doctor going off to do whatever the Doctor does, looking for the Angel. And then Yaz and Dan going off on their own to help with finding this Peggy girl and learning that this guy is an absolute jerk who is her father, essentially. And he's just kind of a jerk so that when he gets killed later on, we don't feel bad about it. But I did kind of like him being like a stuck-up, like, why would he even care? I also liked in this moment that Yaz got to show her police training. She's like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? I'm like, oh, Yaz is actually a police officer. She knows what she's doing. Sadly, doesn't really amount to much in this episode, but I'm like, oh, some characterization for Yaz. She's getting to be useful. Again, wish something happened with it, but it was nice to see. But then we got another cool, creepy sequence with the Angel coming across the field towards them. Very creepy, sending them back to 1901, where they run into the very younger Peggy in this village that has all but disappeared of everyone. And so this has happened a few times in their history. Now, I'm curious what that means, because we eventually learned that they are quantum extracting this timeline for this village, like pulling it out of time. So I'm sort of curious of like what that meant that they were sending people back at this time as well. I'm wondering what the purpose of it was. It was an interesting mystery, but ultimately when the mystery is revealed, I'm sort of like, why were there like these two disappearing events for these people if this was just to get the one Angel, as we learn later on, by extracting it from time? So a little bit wonky there, but I liked the way that this was visualized though, this quantum extraction, where they go to the end of this lane and you can see out into space. And I thought that that was really just a really great visual as well. But then they find this barrier that shows where the Weeping Angels had landed, and it's sort of a connecting barrier to the present. We learned that this old lady that we saw in the beginning of the episode was actually Peggy as an older woman. She doesn't actually get back to her present. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to connect in the next episode, presumably with Yaz and Dan being able to get out and go after the Doctor. But this brings me over back to the Doctor story, because the Doctor finds Dr. Jericho, who I really like. Dr. Jericho. I like this guy who's just like full into science. Like, I'm not scared of these people. I just want to learn more. Like, very cool guy. And so I enjoyed his presence here, but he's studying Claire, and the Doctor runs into Claire and discovers like she had been sent back in time because she'd been chased by an angel. And I also like the little stuff that Doctor does where she like grabs the weeping angel picture and like rips it up so that there's no image of an angel, even though it does come back a few seconds later in like an interesting little sequence. But I like that sort of intense power that the angels seem to have, even with just a drawing of them is insanely creepy. I also liked when the angels break into the house, which is also a really cool and fun sequence, that the Doctor in the basement, she turns on the TV and says, look at the TV, that'll stop them from getting down here faster because you're observing them. And then she also puts it on like a timer so that it keeps phasing out so that they aren't able to break through the television, even though they do get a chance to do that a few little bit later with Dr. Jericho. And I like the angel calling out Dr. Jericho's insecurity, saying that you're loveless, you're giving your life to academia because you couldn't find love anywhere else, and like calling it out and using his own voice was super creepy. Though I don't know if that matches up. Like, I thought the angels could only steal voices of people they killed, but I'm curious. I wasn't even sure how that worked in the first place way back in with the 11th Doctor, so we'll just let it go, but it was effectively creepy here. So all of this stuff was just like really like nothing unique or new for the angels, but it was like cool remixing and just smart, clever usage of them to make them feel intense and scary again. But then the Doctor goes into Claire's mind and finds that there is a weeping angel that is on the run from other weeping angels and used to work for the division, the same division that the Doctor used to work for and is missing her memory of. Again, fascinated by this again, but this again has so little to do with the Flux. Like, the Doctor seems to be more interested in finding her missing memories this season rather than dealing with the world ending and galaxy ending and space and time ending threat. To be fair, I'm more interested in the Doctor's looking for these memories because I think that's more of a personal journey than like galaxy ending stakes that apparently every show needs to have nowadays. And so I actually like this more, but it's sort of like, girl, there's more going on. I understand you want your memories, but more going on here. But I guess she does have at least the excuse that this is sort of directly in front of her. And so I like this connection between her and the angel, and showing that there's different factions of the angels as well. This was all very cool to see. I also like the visualization of the Doctor being in Claire's mind. I thought the way that they show this on this like quarry or whatever was really cool to see. I also should say it was really nice throughout this episode to just see the Doctor being confidently competent again. There's been a whole bunch of episodes recently, especially under Chris Chibnall, where the Doctor just gives a bunch of gobbledygook words and says them really quickly, and that's supposed to make up for the Doctor having like a competent plan in terms of the writing. But here, I actually understood every single idea that the Doctor was expressing and trying to do, and it all made sense to me, and that has been rare under Chris Chibnall. I hate to say that. And so it was just nice to see that, like, I understood the Doctor's plan, I understood what she was trying to do. It wasn't just a bunch of gobbledygook nonsense, and I could follow her plan really, really well, which is kind of funny considering that in this episode, the Doctor actually fails in her plan. So it's kind of funny that the one time I think that Chris Chibnall really nailed her writing, especially in the series and probably overall for his entire run, is the one time that she actually fails. But I still really did enjoy seeing that here. And then they try to escape. And again, all this escape sequence was really, really cool and fun. The angels coming out of the wall. The Doctor was able to find the secret passage because she had noticed it earlier, and we gotten hints of it earlier. Her trying to have the angels line up so that they would catch each other's eye, but failing and sending Dr. Jericho back to 1901 conveniently right next to Yaz and Dan. But all of that I thought was just a clever, like, intense sequence. And then at the end when she escapes and the angels aren't moving and aren't ready to capture her, she's like, why aren't you moving? Why aren't you going after me? She learns that she's been tricked, that the angel that she was after actually got her here in order to trap her rather than anyone else, and that the quantum extraction was to capture her, not the other weeping angel, and that they had made a deal in order to capture her over them. Now, I'm curious why the division weeping angels didn't capture both of them, because they seem to have both of them at the moment, so why not grab both of them rather than just the Doctor? But I guess they're very honorable and honor their deals with other weeping angels, so I guess that makes sense if you want to believe in the honor of the weeping angels. But I thought that this was a really creepy and cool ending for this episode. So to wrap up my review, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought there was some intensity with the angels. I think there's some wonky plotting. Like, again, I didn't really understand why there was like two different time periods and why people in 1901 also disappeared. Like, what were the angels doing there, and what was their intent? Were they just sending them back in time to kill them at that point? That's my only thought, was like they were sending them back in time to get their energy and then killing them there because like we don't need you anymore. That's the only thing I could really think of, but it wasn't entirely clear. So I wasn't sure why there was this time jump other than to, have Yaz and Dan be separated from the events of the Doctor. But other than that, while nothing was particularly new, it was remixed enough that made the angels feel fresh and intense again, and actually tied into something interesting for the Doctor and a clever subversion for for the end with the Doctor getting defeated, and I enjoyed all of that. The only frustrating bit I have with this is that it feels this could have just been a normal episode and had nothing to do with the Flux whatsoever, and the Flux storyline just felt kind of standard and fine and a little bit distanced, and I'm like, I guess these other characters that I don't really have much connection to are gonna go off and end this world-ending threat with Azure and the Passenger and all that, rather than them actually dealing with it themselves. So ultimately, I really liked this episode more on its own merits than it having anything to do with the overall arcing story. And while it didn't necessarily do anything uniquely new that like shocked me, I thought it was a solid rendition of an Angel story that just gave me a fun hour. So that's my thoughts on the Village of the Angels. I'd love to hear your thoughts though down in the comments. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you have the same thoughts that I do on this episode and with the Flux as a whole? But let's see what's gonna happen next episode, because I'm very excited. But until then, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.